Hello, everyone. So my name is Lucy, and I was asked today to talk a little bit about studying medicine with a limb difference. So I'll just work out how to do this. And apologies in advance, I've been fighting a bit of a cough, so I hope I don't have a bit of an episode during this. We'll see. So to give you a bit of a summary of where I am now, I am in my third year of medical school, but technically my second year of studying, because I'm on the graduate course, where in your first year, last year, they basically combine all of the content from years 1 and 2 into one big, horrible year. So I've done that, and now just rejoined the third year of the normal course. So I wanted to give a bit of an overview of life leading up to this point. So initially, when SJ asked me to speak today, I was pretty nervous because I'm not a big fan of public speaking. However, I realized it was probably worth it to face my fear a little bit, if not only to show off some of my cutest baby pictures. So I was born in July 2000 with right-handed symbrachydactyly. So I had no bones in the fingers of my right hand and a thumb that's kind of fused halfway down. After being checked over by the medical team, it was only actually discovered, much to my parents' surprise, when they started unwrapping me from my swaddle. Understandably, it was a very anxious time for my parents, not knowing how it was going to affect me in life. They were referred to the plastics department at Great Ormond Street Hospital, where I had a free phalangeal transfer surgery just before my second birthday. They basically took a little bone from 2 toes on each of my feet and put them into a finger each. And although no parent can ever truly know what the best decision is at the time, I'm so grateful for mine for making that choice. My first memories of Reach are the picnics that we had in Battersea Park when I was younger, and also the birthday cards that I used to get from Reach every year, that were really special to me. In year 3, when everyone had to start learning the recorder, we rented a one-handed one from Reach. My parents quickly learned that anything that they could kind of pitch as extra special was a complete winner for me. So I proudly toured the different classrooms, showing off my new recorder to anyone who would listen. At the age of 9, I was offered a second surgery to lengthen my fingers by inserting pins through them and kind of twisting them, catchily named a distraction augmentation manoplasty. In a bold move, my parents left the decision of whether to go through with the surgery completely down to me. I declined, citing the reasons that I didn't really like the idea of wearing a hospital gown, and I was concerned that if my new fingers were more fragile, then this might interfere with a netball career that I was sure was going to happen as soon as I went to secondary school. Spoiler alert, it very much didn't. But also, honestly, there wasn't anything I really needed longer fingers for. Now, I'm very lucky that as a child I was given the jackpot character trait of loving attention. So when a silicone glove replica of my left hand was made for me, I was really confused when the person said, "Oh, maybe you could wear it if you're feeling self-conscious at parties," because it had never occurred to me that I should be. Of course, that's not to say that I've never been self-conscious. Even now, I have days where I wish my childhood optimism could have stuck around a little longer. I feel very blessed that I can't recall being picked on because of my hand, particularly at school, but I think outside of the school bubble, I had more difficult interactions with strangers, either much younger or older than me, compared to those with my peers. At secondary school, I threw myself into the cadets. They made certain adjustments for me, like the fact that I couldn't support a rifle in just my right hand, which was required during some of the parades, so they gave me the special role of basically just barking orders at everyone instead, which I much preferred anyway. So that's me shouting at everyone there. On one particularly cold exercise, I made the announcement that I had lost all feeling in my right hand, much to the shock of all of my teachers. So I was fed hot chocolate for the next couple of hours until I warmed up a bit, which was a particularly nice turn of events when the alternative was basically just trying to get to sleep in a freezing ditch. We invested in a pair of waterproof gloves for the next one, though. On the various adventure training activities we did, my fear of heights limited me more than my hand ever did. I got into rifle shooting when I was in the cadets as well, which I've continued since, and I recently won my first competition in a division against, to my knowledge, a group of completely able-bodied shooters. The end of school also brought with it my last trip to Great Ormond Street, which I loved my annual visits there, and I always had such a positive experience with the plastics team. On my gap year, I went on a joint expedition with the Jubilee Sailing Trust and the British Exploring Society as Reach's representative. I also worked in a nursery school where I was pleasantly surprised by how accepting a cohort of 2- and 3-year-olds could be about my hand. I used to love their little depictions of me my hand in their portraits, not so much their depictions of the hair on my legs. I thought that was a little brutal. And it was also here where, coincidentally, one of my colleagues is a member of Reach too. So that was really lovely. And it always used to blow the children's minds to see both of us with really similar hands. I wasn't really quite ready yet to study medicine when I left school, so I went off to study biomedical science first instead. I always joke that 5 years sounded like a really long time to be studying, and now I'm doing 7, so. From the nice bubble I had made myself at school of people who had grown up knowing about my hand, I felt a surge of self-consciousness about starting over, which swiftly died down when my flatmate Emily grabbed my right hand to drag me to the dance floor in Freshers. I joined the University Royal Naval Unit, and I spent a summer working in a lab doing various experiments with my makeshift tucked-in gloves. I applied to medical school in the final year of my undergrad, and I didn't shy away from mentioning my hand in my application. Oh, this is a bit my personal statement. And it was true that my experiences with healthcare are the ones that led me to want to deliver the same level of care for others. I know firsthand how a caring team can transform what might be a really daunting experience in hospital for a patient and their family into a really positive one. I was concerned about whether my hand was going to be an issue for various universities. Where I studied for my undergrad, agreed to do a kind of manual dexterity assessment for me, which I passed, but no other universities seemed to have a similar process in place, and they just couldn't tell me whether it was going to be a problem once I was enrolled. The university that I wanted to study at most proved quite problematic to get through to. This is a particularly unflattering photo that I took on my laptop whilst on a never-ending phone call being passed back and forth between university admissions, medicine-specific admissions, back to the main switchboard, given a random email address or an online form. I'm looking quite dead behind the eyes at this point. I think we're about 40 minutes in to this particular phone call. No one seemed to have any answers for me in a time where I really needed a firm one, as I had a deadline to confirm my choice. Every person would require a new retelling of my story, and it was a surprisingly emotional process for me to constantly have to repeat, "My name is Lucy, I was born with this condition." I say surprisingly, as it's such a normal thing for me to say, "Oh, I was born with it," when people ask, and I love talking about it normally. My hand had never previously been framed in a way that was, "You can't do something because of it." And here I was begging various people to just tell me how to prove to them that it wasn't going to be a problem. There just wasn't a process in place to deal with an applicant like me. But thankfully, after dozens of phone calls, I got through to someone who finally agreed that they would take the assessment done at the other university. I began my first year of medicine last September, and after the admissions process, I was perhaps a little less optimistic about how it might go. But I'm very pleased to report that the support I've received has been particularly great. Occupational Health originally asked me if there was anything they could put in place to help me, but I told them I couldn't really answer that until I'd started on placement and understood a bit more how certain procedures were done. Some of the help I got I asked for, and some I didn't. My clinical skills instructor worked with me to adjust certain techniques to make them work for me. There's a tradition in medicine where you have to examine from the right-hand side of the bed. There's no medical reason for it. It's just, I think, more convenient for the average right-handed doctor. So in all of the practice rooms and the ones set up in the exams, the beds, like you can see in this picture, are just rammed up against the wall so you can't get around the other side. This was particularly tricky for me, as for a certain examination, I needed to use my left hand for something that my right hand just isn't big enough for. But from this side of the bed, I just couldn't twist my arm around to do it right. My instructor spoke to the exam board, who decided, quote, it wasn't worth upholding a tradition that actively excludes some students. All of the beds in my exams were therefore positioned so that I could access both sides. And this student support card that I've shown here is one that I can take into my exams and give to the examiners at each station to explain my hand, and that whilst I'm still required to complete the same competencies as everyone else, I might adjust the technique slightly as long as I achieve the same outcome. This has provided a lot of comfort to me. I don't have to worry on the day of my exam about explaining to countless people that I may do things a bit differently. I think I assumed that any adjustments I needed to be made, I would pretty much have to beg for, while simultaneously trying to justify my place at medical school and my ability to keep up with everyone else around me. But I'm very grateful that this hasn't been the case. During a tutorial last year, which had a focus on disability, I brought up my admission struggles and how the process had made me feel really quite insecure about something I rarely find reason to be insecure about. Quite conveniently, this was overheard by the head of admissions and led to a very thoughtful discussion about how the process might be improved in the future. I think it's crazy that a query as simple as mine was so difficult for the university to answer at the time, but I have an appreciation for the way that my experience has since been acknowledged and apologized for, and they have said that they will keep me in the loop when developing this process. Oh, and this is when my brother ran the marathon for Reach this year. He's watching the live stream. He's going to love that applause. So the majority of this year has been hospital placements. I've now spent 2 weeks on my first one, and I'm really enjoying it. I did find myself particularly anxious in the weeks leading up to it, though, trying to decide whether I needed to give people advance warning about my hand or just to turn up without saying anything. And I also struggled adjusting from the bubble last year of being taught with the same groups of people by the same people every week who knew my situation, to constantly thinking I was going to have to explain myself and being scared that a doctor might snap at me at the end of a long shift that I'm not doing something completely by the book. The truth is, after all that worry, it's just not really something that comes up. In a teaching session last week, an instructor asked if I could, quote, put my gloves on properly when the loose fingers were flapping around. And I snapped back slightly defensively, I don't have any fingers. I'm pretty sure you won't make that mistake again. Given it's been such a short time on placement, I was worried about not having much to say about it in the context of my limb difference. Perhaps even feeling a little disappointed that I couldn't share more specific examples of how I've overcome certain challenges. But that, in itself, is the point. It's been 2 weeks, and so far there's nothing I haven't been able to do. It's a reminder that we are capable of far more than we maybe give ourselves credit for. In future, I'd like to channel more of the wild optimism of my 9-year-old self, whose confidence, whilst wildly misplaced in her netball prowess, would never doubt her ability to keep up with everyone else around her. Thank you.
How about it, Lucy Sherrington? Don't go away. I'm going to keep you here for a second. Take your bow. Absolutely brilliant. Lucy Sherrington. Stay here. Sorry, Mr. Bush. First of all, thank you so much for that wonderful honesty. And what is it? Another great presentation, wasn't it? Would you mind taking a few questions? We didn't warn you about that, did we?
No.
No.
yeah, go on.
Is that okay? How about having a seat over there?
Oh, yeah.
Take your water, just in case. Because you can use your water if you want to take a little bit more time to answer your question. So we've got on Slido, if you want to ask Lucy any questions, you can. And the number, if you just go on there and you've got either slido.com and type in the number, and you'll get in there as well. But I'm going to start off by asking families will always ask the same questions. You know, what was it like? You know, how did you cope with this? And they're always framing it with their children in mind. What is the most common question that you get from people in your medical world that you're now in?
You know, I haven't been on placement for long, so I haven't had many. I think one of the things is I don't get asked many questions, maybe because people are just too nervous to ask. And also, I just think they don't really notice, which is also funny. Because I don't know, I think you think, oh, everyone is looking at it. But most people just don't. I had a question from a patient, mainly because I kind of brought it up, and I was chatting to her about it. And I basically gave part of the spiel that I did about the different surgeries I'd had. And it was really funny because we were coming back from X-ray, and the porter that was driving her along was just looking at me the whole time listening to the story. He was like bashing into the wall a bit, and I was like, oh, you can keep going. And then when we got back to the room, the porter stayed for an extra 5 minutes to just finish listening to my story, which I thought was really sweet. But yeah, I haven't had many questions. I think either because people don't notice or they're too nervous to ask. But I think it kind of depends on the environment. Like when I snapped back a little bit at that first doctor, I think I'd been on edge a bit all week that someone was going to question me a little bit. And then it happened again on Thursday, but I was so much more ready for it, and so I could just kind of laugh it off a bit.
But again, that happens to anybody about anything. If you're just tired or whatever, you know, we all get a bit snappy. You know,
exactly.
No, we do have a few questions here. Funny enough, this is one I asked you earlier on about the area of medicine you're going to specialise in.
Yes. I don't know.
That's an easy answer.
Yeah. I spent 2 years working in the nursery, so I've always kind of thought paediatrics would be something I'd love to go down that route, maybe. My brother really wants me to be a hand surgeon because he just thinks that would be really fun. When parents bring their children in, I'd be like,
it's always a good decision.
Me.
It's fun. Why not?
Yeah.
Actually, we've got quite interesting question from I think Mel, who's asking about, have you been limited by what field of medicine you could practice?
I'd say slightly. I obviously did the cadets, and then I was in the Royal Naval Unit at university. And when I was a teenager, the idea of being like a surgeon in the army really appealed to me. But the military does have really specific medical requirements. So when I had to do a full medical when I joined the Naval Unit, which I categorically failed, but they let me in anyway. And I said to the doctor, oh, was it my hand? And he went, don't worry, you failed on a lot of other things.
Yeah, okay. I'm not sure that's a great number.
Yeah.
Lucy, thank you so much for your time. And actually, can I just say, I've just seen your notes and just thinking, you've got flipping good eyesight, because it's in the tiniest font you could ever imagine. And that was an outstanding presentation, and we just loved hearing your story and your amazing positivity. Thank you very much. One more time, Lucy Sherrington. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.